Another Friday panel. They said we couldn't do it. You said you were coming in here to blow it up last week and they wouldn't invite you back. But here we are, Tommy, Dion and John. We're going first names only. We're not doing surnames. Welcome back.
Excellent.
We had a lot of reaction to last week's panel. A lot of emails. Got one email, John, that said, more John Greene talking about Longford, please. Sincerely, David.
Sincerely, the Longford
The
County
world
Board.
needs more John Greene talking about Longford.
Scott sent us a message, Dion, said, can you make Dion Fanning your deadline day reporter?
Okay, fine. Yeah, I know nothing. So it'll be no different as long as we don't have any purple dildos.
Yeah, you say you know nothing, but we've got a clock ticking on your prediction last week, so we're going to play last week's prediction for you right now.
Well,
Isak will sign for Liverpool next week.
You think so? And now the opportunity is there to get Isak now.
When I say, can you clip that? You should be worried.
Well, we're still okay. What are we? 1:45 on Friday. I think it actually just depends on whether you think the week begins or ends on Sunday.
Is it the Gregorian calendar or?
I would say it'll be close. It'll be Monday at the very latest, but it will be close.
And
Newcastle, demonstrating exactly what we talked about last week. Newcastle have signed a player that none of them had ever heard of until yesterday. They're now talking about how he's got a ceiling higher than ceilings are higher. It's a great phrase. I might use it with our own football teams. You've got a great high. Your ceiling is very high.
Well, he's 6'6".
Well, yeah, but the ceiling would be lower. You would have thought
very high. Yeah.
Ceiling is lower if you're effectively. Anyway, so they're happy, which is one box ticked, and I think it'll happen.
Tommy Martin has it all. Prefer to remain anonymous. That was the last email that we got about Friday's panel.
Thank you, darling.
I think you should have finished the show with that. Let's start.
Where are we? So 2 League of Ireland teams in the league phase of European competition for the first time ever. Shelbourne beat Linfield again, and Shamrock Rovers held Santa Clara to go through 2-1 on aggregate. At the same time, the FAI preparing to announce a new CEO whilst making redundancies. Mourinho and Solskjaer sacked in Turkey. Jim Gavin for president. I mean, this is a real hodgepodge. This is a smorgasbord of a Friday panel topics. And I think we're going to try and take another stab at the change in media landscape that I brought you all in here for last week that we didn't really get to. But quick out of the blocks, breaking news. Trent Alexander-Arnold has not made the England squad. Who is shocked by that?
I am shocked by it. It's in some ways it's fascinating because one of the reasons I think Trent Alexander-Arnold went on the career journey that he went on was because of what happened with him with England when he was overlooked for so many years by Gareth Southgate and ridiculously overlooked. And I think when that happened, it spoke still of the power of that sort of English media kind of impact on a player in terms of, are you getting recognised by England? Are England acknowledging you? He was playing for the European champions, one of the best teams that English football has ever seen, and yet he was being overlooked by England and left out of scraping into major tournament squads and sitting on the bench. And I think that planted a seed in his head about why do I have to be the fall guy for all this? Why can't I be a different player? Why do I have to be scurrying around at right back, chasing back, balls dropping over my head and everyone's saying, Trent, you've fucked up again. I'm going to be a different player. I might be a midfielder. Maybe I'll be a midfielder. And this idea kind of took hold in his head that he could be a midfielder. That was indulged for a while. But there was always this thing, Klopp had said this thing about him, why would you make the best right back in the world a midfielder? And Klopp didn't care about what everyone else saw, what Gareth Southgate saw. And he was right, because he was playing at a higher level. What he did during those peak years of Liverpool was just extraordinary from that position. Like he was playing a new position, even though he was standing where, and this was the limitations. I have great admiration for Gareth Southgate as a kind of person, as a manager, he was really cautious and third rate. And one of the reasons was he saw somebody standing there and thought they have to do what they've always done there, whereas Trent Alexander-Arnold was doing something different. And then he evolved into this player, and I think he got lazy, and he's gone to Real Madrid, which is a club that indulges people to a certain degree, but he hasn't even been indulged because he's out of the team. So it's not a surprise, but it's sort of a. Can you be a cautionary tale if you're a multi-millionaire player playing for where did it all go wrong? Trent Alexander-Arnold, but it's some kind of a tale, if not a cautionary one.
At least before, when he was being left out of the squad, and I agree, it was always weird when he was being left out, but it felt like there was way more competition there. But right now, like Reece James seems to be the only real recognised right back, and you got Livramento, Jed Spence, Ezri Konsa, like these people who have played right back, but it's not Trent Alexander-Arnold levels of right back.
He's been left out by a different manager, probably for the same reasons, though, isn't he? Because Southgate, he said, "Well, I've got Kyle Walker there. He's." Manchester City's right back. He's incredibly fast. If he does happen to get caught out of position, he gets back and he defends, and that'll do me. And I can't quite figure out what Trent do, and I don't have time. And he didn't have the sophistication that Klopp had to make him work within the England system that he wanted to play, which was famously conservative. Tuchel's got a year, right? Tuchel's like that great war movie, The Dirty Dozen. It's just like, right, we're here to get a job done, win the World Cup, get out of Dodge, head for Saudi Arabia, and and mega millions. So he doesn't want to mess around indulging somebody who, I think what Dion's suggesting there, he's almost kind of like in his sort of be here now phase, where the brilliance of his his explosive early brilliance, he's got not that he's driving Rolls Royces into swimming pools and doing lots of cocaine or anything, but he's just become overindulged, and his ego's got to a point where I'd say Tuchel's looked at him and going like, I don't have time or the inclination to work you into what I want to do, which I don't think is going to be spectacular from an England point of view. I think it's going to be pretty functional, and he's got guys there that he reckons will do that job better. Obviously knows Reece James pretty well, so doesn't want Trent sulking in the back row, the back of the bus.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried because I'm kind of sitting here. Well, I was listening to Dion, and I was as he was talking, I was closing my eyes, and I was thinking of peak Paul Scholes back in the day, sitting on the bench looking at Lamps doing his strutting his stuff. Yeah, I'm slightly more worried that I don't really seem to have an opinion on Trent's. Whether or not Trent should be in the England squad.
You're waiting for the Longford, right?
It's a good point that England have always had those players. You go back to Glenn Hoddle.
Like Scholes was exactly the same.
Scholes was one that they just couldn't figure out.
One of the greatest English midfielders of the 90s and 90s, who was winning Premier Leagues, Champions. And he couldn't get in the team. They couldn't find a place for him in the team. Wasn't that?
Yeah, well, that was but that time was the kind of peak of that kind of English brain rot as well, in terms of like Steven Gerrard, playing in his favoured central midfield role and sort of determined to be this person that he was. I must be Brian Robson, I must be Roy Keane, when he was a totally different player, and I think Trent Alexander-Arnold in his own way has kind of suffered from that. Now, I imagine, what Tuchel is also going to be saying is it's August, he's joined a new club. This is like, they're not going to. Tommy's right. Like he's here for a good time, not a long time. But like he's not going to. They're going to qualify for the World Cup. Like that's not an issue.
If Trent is bending in crosses and free kicks into the top corner in the latter stages of the Champions League, come the run into the World Cup, then he's going to have a decision then, isn't he?
But he just seems to have He seems to have in the last 6 months, and it was interesting. Slot said stuff about it, how he'd been training and things like that in his last year, and you see that clip that gets shown a lot of the goal Manchester United scored at Old Trafford, where like it was just a study in casualness, like it was, and he's always on that grey area of casualness anyway. But there were so many redeeming features. But then last season, he just seemed to be looked playing like he had checked out. And, you know, at the very highest level, if you check out, sometimes it's not that easy to check back in again.
Not in a World Cup when you've got 7 games.
Yeah.
And nobody wins the World Cup without, dodgy defence.
Yeah. Qualifying for the World Cup seems increasingly important to Ireland, like way more maybe than it should. You even have the international manager, Heimer Hallgrímsson, talking about how he knows it's important for the staff as well, which is a weird situation to be in. So the FAI has announced it will introduce a voluntary redundancy programme and potentially move towards compulsory job losses. And what the governing body says is the start of a significant transformation programme to modernise how football is developed and delivered in Ireland. FAI said that without the job losses, both voluntary and possibly compulsory, they will not be able to deliver success on an international stage as well as within the country. I mean, this is just a...
It was an outrageous statement. It was just an outrageous statement from a chronically failing organisation. That the way that, that email, like the twist in that email when it came in, like, here, what are we announcing here? It's a transformative project or whatever it was. And it's, you're actually talking about redundancies.
Yeah.
And to say with their, like, unbroken track record of failure that, we won't be able to deliver without making these redundancies, when whether they make them or not, nobody believes they're capable of doing anything. And this is not to talk like, we've seen Will Clark come out this week, who's a really good person within the FAI. There's lots of talented people in there. Shane Robinson, another one. Like, there are really good people in there doing tireless work, like really good work.
Yeah.
But like their inability just to just to kind of even read the room. But like, it's just take this, be honest about this. Don't try and dress it up. Like, nobody is buying any stuff with the FAI.
Just the email was appalling, and the jargon and the speaking it and getting people with the skill set and all this nonsense but take a step back from it first. This week, Irish football, this phrase, this Irish football, this thing. This week, Irish football was about Shelbourne and Shamrock Rovers. Okay, it was a really important thing for lots of reasons, and we talked about it last week, not just financial, which gets thrown up too often. It was a really important week for those two clubs and for the league, and therefore for football in Ireland and for footballers. And the FAI decides that the day before these games is the day to bring out this news. They also decide that on the day in which a really important audit is being published, because they want money to fund the academies, and in a classic Irish football move, the cart was put before the horse, and they went ahead looking for money without actually getting their ducks in a row and getting their facts and figures. So they brought in this Belgian company who have expertise all over the world in doing this to do an audit on their academies. This is being announced on the same day. So on a week when should be talking about Shelbourne and Shamrock Rovers, day before the game, or if we want to talk about the academies, they decide that this is the day that they should bring out this news. So from taking that as your starting point and then moving on to what Dion is saying, what was actually contained in it and what they're actually talking about, which is nonsense. And this is at a time that they are saying we need to get money for the game in Ireland. And the look that came out of everything that happened this week is something that we've said time and time again. Government are looking at the FAI and they are nervous and they are very, very reluctant to do anything, to be seen to be giving them money at a time when the organisation just doesn't seem to even be able to do the most basic of things. Funny you mentioned Will Clark there, because I actually I asked Dan this morning, Dan McDonald, just because I wasn't sure. I said, is Will Clark an FAI employee? Because I wasn't sure, because he's so fucking impressive every time he speaks. I've just come across him a couple of times and he's so impressive. So that just goes to show there is people in there who have of a high calibre, but the organisational feeling coming out, the culture, that how they look, how they make decisions, when they do things, how they do them, their sense of timing, everything. It's just, I have seen nothing since in the post-John Delaney era that says to me that the FAI is in any way on sure footing, or even on some road back to it being on sure footing.
Yeah, it feels kind of like the FAI are like the Man Utd of sort of sporting federations, in that, people go in with, I'm sure Mark
Cannon.
Who's the
Mark Cannon,
yeah. And Jonathan Hill were sort of highly thought after executives in their field, and they sort of end up like the Ruben Amorim and Eric Ten Hag. Their their reputations put into the meat grinder, which like suggests a bit like United, that there's the scale of the sort of structural problems there are almost unmanageable. I think it all comes back to the ridiculous structure of Irish football, with the factions and the sections and the Afghan tribal warlords shake their heads at the tribal nature of it. That was brilliantly sort of illustrated with the debacle over the famous Pathways plan, which we've heard a few weeks ago. Looks like it's certainly big aspects of it are dead in the water in terms of the calendar, etc., because they empowered this guy to go come up with this plan, presented around the country, said they'd done all the consultation. He binned off after a while, fed up with this. He did it at Ruben Amorim. I'm out of here playing with my tactics board. Yeah. They eventually said, and then the board, who are, obviously a mix of football people, independent people, we're going to push this through. No, maybe not. These people aren't happy. They're not happy. Some of them are happy. We voted it through, but we're not sure. I mean, as John said, how can government look at that and go, sorry, how many millions you want a year?
Like that academy audit is really important for what they want to achieve. And it got lost, and there was important stuff contained in it, and like negative, bad. There was.
Well, it was mainly like it was extraordinary. Like when you think they were benchmarking against the
51 to 100
countries in the world. And now there are things, and I heard Will Clark talking about this, and we talked about it last week, and I wouldn't agree with everything that's in it. And I mentioned last week when I was writing something about the currency and about it, and somebody in the League of Ireland, who I know very well, was on to me talking about the negativity I was showing towards the Pathways plan. And I was, talking about this idea, and I still hold to this, and you see it in their academies plan. Like, there's 26 academies they're talking about, 26 academies. I know Will Clark thinks you can't centralise for various reasons, but 26 academies means they're not all academies. Yeah. You can't have...
You were saying like 4 academies?
Well, 4, now, I accept it, but like I think effectively what's going to happen is you're going to have 3 or 4 anyway that are actual academies. Like, Rovers, Pats, Shelbourne, like they're going to, and they've got private money going into it. Like Rovers' revenue is multiples of any other club, and then, you're going to see, and like as they have success, you're going to see a divide anyway. But it's just what you want that to be.
Are Rovers becoming the first proper example in the League of Ireland of a club who's actually spending their money pretty okay, using their money wisely? Or are we going to see another boom bust, do you think?
No, I think I don't.
The sense is
that they are, and
they're improving all the time.
They are improving. I've been to their academy, and it's a brilliant operation with really good people there. But I think if you have so many academies, whatever they are, you create this sense of people moving places for no reason. And are they really? They can't all be academies. If everything's an academy, nothing is an academy. And
you mean like a transfer system then that happens?
Surely we're at a point we're so low that we need to get one good academy.
Well, we will have. Look, the money, like the thing,
get to 4 and then get.
Well, like the thing is, like if they get the money they're looking for from the government, would that have more of an effect being spread across 26 or doing something?
Yeah.
Top tier academies in England, 70% of the top tier academies, those players never sign a professional contract. So that's like if you were to say to a school, if school came to you and said, what kind of school? Well, actually, 70% of our people never go to third level education. You'd be like, that's not. So what else are you doing? What are you doing for them? And like their business is failure. They're in the business of failure, like for the individual. And you were saying the line, like Marcus Sullivan's line about it.
Yeah, that was the line. He had a great interview with Mike Quirk on his podcast a couple of years ago. I think he works for the Norwegian Institute of Sport now, but he was talking about the standard model of talent development, which is what we all know as your kid. The kids play away and then they get snapped up and they move on and they get into an academy or a development squad and they go on. But as Dion says, the rates of inverted commas failure and success are stark. But he says he calls it the broken egg approach, which is basically how we develop young sports people is like putting a load of eggs into a plastic bag, throwing it at the wall, and if one doesn't break, we call that success. So that's how he put it. But Daniel McDonald's piece, I think it was yesterday, about the week as John, in terms of PR management, very interesting strategy. But I think he was making the argument, or sort of putting the fact that the argument has been made about does the side of Irish football represented by Shelbourne Shamrock Rovers and the people running these clubs who are sort of getting their houses in order and private investment and run them as businesses, does that need to be a twin track, a separate thing now from what the FAI is, which is, as this week has shown, doesn't feel like it at the moment in any fit state to be the recipient of government funding for like a structured investment in academies. So who do you give the money to? Who do you give the money to? Because the government won't give the money to something that isn't regulated by Sport Ireland, doesn't have boxes ticked. So as you say, John, are they going to give it to the FAI after a week like this?
Yeah, and are they going to give it to? Do they trust the clubs enough? Yes, to give it to them. Now there was a story. Dan had it this week that John Martin might be.
Yeah, the new CFO. I think you said CEO at the start of the.
Yeah. Is he not replacing Mark Cannon?
That's what he became. So he promoted upwards.
That's if that happens.
Created a chief football officer.
If that happens, that's feels like a positive move as well.
It does, but this is the thing. But it's not. Goes back to the Will Clark point that there's not. There aren't. It's not that there aren't people within the FAI. Correct. Like Shane Robbins is another one who is brilliant, and you hear him talking about this and go, these are the type of people. But the question probably comes back to, are you actually going to do that? We see these tensions we see the tensions in England between the FA and the Premier League, but are these people going to do more good continuing to work in the FAI or working at a club that may allow them to kind of implement some of these things?
All the branding on the during the week on the Academy report when it came out, all the branding was League of Ireland.
There's
no FAI branding on it, which I thought was an interesting statement.
Look, the league. This is the thing, and
if we're at a point where we're saying that the League of Ireland is more trustworthy than the FAI. There's a lot of self-interest there as well.
Well, there is, but I think there is, and I think as you go further down, there's still that same sense of scrabbling for scarce resources, whether they're players, and we could go deep into grassroots if you want to talk about like the kind of craziness that, and I think it's actually reached, like from what I've hearing from lots of people this year, has been absolutely particularly crazy in terms of players. I'm not talking about academy players, just players moving clubs. Like there seems to be an awful lot of movement, and most of that is unnecessary.
And is the pathway, if you take a Kula player, for example, this isn't a real example, but a Kula under 12 gets onto the pathway then into one of these academies that we're talking about? Or is there a step in between Kula and Shamrock Rovers?
Kula or GA club, Conan.
Donkey United, sorry.
You're sitting back going, oh, whoa, don't bring us into this.
No, I don't know. I don't want to. It's not as obviously. Look, if those things are nobody wants. If you're an 11-year or 12-year-old kid, it's your job almost to think you're going to be a professional footballer. You know what I mean? That's what you're meant to think, and nobody's going to say to any kid, oh, you can't, don't do that. You'd be better off, you'd be better off staying where you are. You're better off because...
There's kids at the age of 8 who are playing for, high-level teams. And at the end of the season, right, you all need to retrial again to be part of your team for next year. And you won't all make it because there'll be, half get in 5 new lads or whatever. And they'll be told at the age of 8... go and find another team.
Well, a friend of mine texted me last week to say that a girl and his daughter's under-8s Division 7 team had been poached by like quite a big club in Dublin.
Yeah.
And why?
A pathway club?
Well, like, just why though? Why? Like, what? Let them stay there. Like division, like maybe let them stay there and play, as Tommy said. Like, and that whole idea, because you're actually at that level, they're pretending like that they're part of the football industry. This is what they do. Look, if you're in an academy in England and you talk to the academies in England are in the business of failure for everybody except like the 0.1%. But like, there's no need for anyone in Ireland to be really acting like that, because especially at that level, it's not even realistic. Like, but it does also, as Tommy says, like, it actually just means, I think, that coaches kind of think, well, there's nothing we can. This kid, this 8-year-old, this guy, we've taken
Lost cause.
They've hit their ceiling. This 8-year-old has hit their ceiling. Yeah. Let's get someone else in. This 8-year-old over here.
It's always a hard conversation to have. I mean, it's the worst part of being a manager. You got to sit there, but it's all part of it. I hate it. It hurts me more than it hurts them.
Do you remember the old do you remember the old Unbelievable sketch? The manager giving the halftime shouting and roaring, and you think it's hard now. Wait till you go up to under 13 next year.
Can I play devil's advocate here, though?
Just before I just want to link the two things very quickly, which is something I saw when we're talking about an historic week for the league. Over half the players that played for Shelbourne and Shamrock Rovers last night came through the UK academy and football system, not the Irish system, because there isn't really one. So while we're saying it was a great week, we do so, and we acknowledge that the players for the most part that were part of that were schooled in England, not in Ireland.
Yeah,
in their football.
Yeah, and that is an important point, because ever since it became clear what the consequences of Brexit were going to be, from an Irish, not being able to go over to England until you're 18, there's been an awful lot of talk about, this is an opportunity for Irish football, and it's again, we were talking about those kind of hidden things in Ireland. Like we can very easily comfort ourselves with these, and I don't think anyone is hiding from the reality, as the audit shows, but like, we can comfort ourselves with these ideas. Oh, there's an opportunity here. There's such
a good opportunity. We missed the deadline to apply for funding,
and we missed all the deadlines. But in the meantime, generations are kind of not getting those hours, not getting the whatever those stats are. I think Tommy Conan had a piece about this a few weeks ago, about the stats in terms of how many kids are actually getting full-time football now compared to
that was based out of the Football Families.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so like those things, that's the reality. And sometimes I kind of think it's like that famous story, which he'd be cancelled for today, about Gay Byrne saying, in the Late Late Show or something, sometimes when you're during the depths of the 1980s, like sometimes I think we should go back, with our cap in hand to the Queen and say we're sorry, and will you take us back? Now, I'm not advocating that before everyone.
And apologise for what we've done.
Yeah, something like that. I'm not advocating that in any way, but I do think, as we're waiting for this opportunity.
The argument for joining the Commonwealth is
well made. Like how do we, like we keep saying that self-sufficiency is a great idea, and we should be, it's what we should be aiming for, but like, would you say, let's try and renegotiate that deal at the moment? Because in the meantime, like while it's going to work for a few who get into places, there's going to be more players. If you believe in the academy system, which is again probably a broader debate, but if you believe in the academy system, and we are committed to the academy system, for better or for worse, we're committed to it. Like, if you believe in it, should you be saying, right, until we actually solve it, is there some workaround where we can get players back to England? You know what I mean? Now that sounds like, that's to me. Now I'm going to speak. The people will be putting up the the Stephen Ray meme, you know, like, and all that kind of stuff, because I'm suggesting anything, you know, we realign ourselves, because we have to do this ourselves now. We'll stand on our own 2 feet. We can't
do we not have a bad history of exporting our problems to England?
We do, yeah, we do. But that's we've still done it. You know what I mean? We've still done it.
I think it's been stagnation once again in the post-Brexit area. You know, we have.
Well, that's it. You know, until
Dion's talking about opportunity, but the opportunity hasn't really. There's been a few success stories, but it hasn't been.
If you could say, the reason I bring that up is because what John says about the academy. If you could say, right, the success of League of Ireland clubs is based on. You know, the fact that we've actually taken the opportunities post-Brexit. Now, I don't think that's a huge factor, because we haven't really taken that opportunity. The success of League of Ireland is, and this is one of those great success stories that nobody really saw coming. You know, whether it's COVID, lockdown, all these things, people, that kind of connection, people feeling there's something authentic about it, lots of things, and it's an incredible thing, and it's a great thing. And I think when you see, you know, 2 teams at this stage of European football, it's fantastic, and it's something to build on. And I'm not saying this is what you do, but I'm just saying that while we're waiting for this opportunity to materialise,
would that not have the consequence of, oh, that problem's been sorted, right? Let's turn the public hose somewhere else.
Maybe it would.
When we talk about the sort of sense, a bit of a sense of, you know, fraternity among the League of Ireland people, it's maybe that they all know that they're all trying to work together to create this mythical football industry in the country from one way or another, whether it's better stadiums, bigger crowds, better broadcasting deals, better academies, more revenues, more commercial, etc., and that there's a kind of we're all trying to work towards that. And, you know, I think everybody accepts, I mean, it's been laid out time and time again, and government now accept and acknowledge that, you know, the 2 things are sort of here looking at each other, and they agree. It's like, you know, the couple in the rom-com who just can't quite get it together, that they know the money needs to go in, they know where it needs to go, but how do they actually, you know, have to meet, like, and it's going back to our point about where are we putting this money now? Like, the money that they're talking about, when, you know, what I think it was 8 million was the figure a year.
8 million a year eventually, yeah.
You know, how much do we spend on the phone pouches? You know, it's relatively pretty small, but
Tommy, they can still go to, like, if all the players who were going to England were tapped up by academies in the rest of Europe, nobody would say anything about it. You say, great, they're off.
Is that the problem sorted?
Yeah, and we'd be quite happy with that, because
I think everybody understands that that's, by sheer practicality, not likely to be.
Well, no, because geography is history for the most part. Like, you know we're close to.
But it's part of the whole discussion about having a serious football industry, and I think there's something like Ireland is one of the reasons that, like, the League of Ireland has maybe had the success and different. You know, often hear the JNLR figures come out, and it's like, or you know, our show is up 10% in the last 10 years. That's because maybe Ireland's population has risen, and these things kind of carry, is that there has been more money sloshing around the country. There's more rich benefactors. I mean, the majority of League of Ireland clubs, for all that they're a more, you know, profit, or there's more turnover in general, most of them are being propped up by wealthy people. You know, that, I mean, Shelburne or Mossy Quinn admitted that when he took the job that they're running a million a year deficit, and that can't continue. That, you know, Gareth Kelleher with Pats, obviously Philip Doherty with Derry, but there is a lot more money sloshing into the country and sloshing into the football industry, and I think the bottom line is just come back to the point about the revenue from the UEFA thing. It is all about money. It is all about investment, and that is how you build an industry. Suddenly, you know, somebody had the wherewithal to give money to South Dublin County Council to build Tallaght Stadium, however many years ago, and there was a lot of headaches to get that done. But that's a shining example of what you can do, you know, when that investment comes. So again, that comes back to this point of weeks like this with the FAI business and all that. It just feels like that sort of getting that crucial investment is just doesn't seem to be able to get over the line.
What I don't understand, and John probably knows more about this because you're close to a lot of the thinking on this, is why, on a very simple level, after the John Delaney era, the FAI remained as the FAI. Like, it needed to be, apart from anything else, it just needed to be called something else. Like, because like the FAI is a brand, and they've done, I agree with you, there's been nothing since that actually makes you really think differently, even, the way they approached various committees, like all that stuff. There's nothing that, like, at the very least, it needs to. It would literally just be cosmetic.
They did on their social media pages. Remember, they had the
Irish
FAI
football,
account and an Irish football.
I mean, that's what the Olympic movement did.
Yeah.
The problem football had in that period was that it was. I'm not sure exactly what it's like now, but it was for a very long time. Pre-John Delaney, during John Delaney and post-John Delaney, very, very fragmented, and there were lots of different groups with a lot of self-interest involved, like, the schoolboy group or the league group or the Kerry group, and I suppose no, I tell you, we were always quite passive. But one of the things that John Delaney achieved, in his early days, was to kind of unite that to a certain extent. And all these different factions, it's like the breakup of the old USSR after Delaney left. It was all these factions were let loose again, and there was nobody to control them.
Strong and stable leadership under.
It sent Irish football back a long way, and it's still it hasn't recovered from that, really. So that kind of shock of all these groups started out. I mean, the collapse of the latest plan for Irish football, which, I mean, you touched on it there, Tom. It is gone. That Conan's plan. It's in the scrap heap now. So there's a new guy coming in. There'll be a new plan. Will it work? Will it get the support of Irish football? So you could rebrand. I mean, they changed their logo, didn't they? After all that, but I mean, you could
it's also the rebranding would also,
same factions will still be there.
But the rebranding would also then include, perhaps, and if it's more than cosmetic, again, looking at what we want from the FAI, what the people who are in there, even the good people, are doing there, rather than what can they be doing? Because it does come back to this point about the academies and. Whatever way you think they should be constituted, it's like, who do we want to be doing this?
Yeah,
and is it the best people in the clubs who are doing it, or is it somehow the FAI can run it? Like, is it like the argument at the moment? And you can't put up much of a counter argument because of the success of Shells, Rovers. Is that they're in a far better position to be doing it than any central football organisation. But that then brings the point, why would you, again, to go back to that, why would you give money to the Football Association of Ireland to do this when you're then saying, right, well, actually scatter it among the clubs who are doing it.
Yeah, but there's as you say, there's no coincidence about the branding and that.
No.
I sometimes wonder, the famous line about when you're talking about why these things are starting to seem to be institutional, the Billy Morton line about there being too many bicycles outside Merrion Square, where the old FAI headquarters were, and it was a perception that while the rugby had the sort of professional classes sewn up and the GAA had official Ireland's ear, that soccer was run by guys who cycled to FAI HQ for board meetings.
Well, that's it, and
etc. And I look at Ireland now. And again, come back to the point, there's plenty of money in Ireland. Like, you look at, Irish clubs go away and play in Norway, and you look at, Molde and these teams playing these lovely little 10,000-seater, dinky little Lego stadiums on the edge of a fjord built by, and you kind of go, it's the local power company, the Nor Power Arena, whatever. And you kind of go, God, why can't we have a little 6,000-seater?
Irish sport has plenty of that. Unfortunately, soccer, the football or soccer, haven't been able to tap into that in the way that the GAAs has been, or rugby, or even other smaller sports.
There's too many the stadium should be built for all sport. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, you'll see this, like Fitzgerald Stadium in Killarney is going to be redeveloped for how many matches a year that it's going to be full. Like, you've got all these things, all these stadiums in very close proximity to each other. Look, stadiums in Cork. Like,
have Celtic Park and Brandywell next door to each other.
Yeah.
Like, there's a laneway in
so
between.
There's no. We were over for the rugby, the Six Nations game in Marseille last year, and we were covering the under-20s the next night, and it was in Aix-en-Provence, and they were, I think, the Division 2 side in France at the time, but small city, small, big.
Yeah.
I don't know what the stadium was a modular stadium with one stand, one permanent stand, and 4 modular stands, which is essentially sort of temporary, a bit like the stand in the RDS had been. Lovely atmospheric, 10,000 seater, 8,000 seater, whatever it was. Food vans outside. All the locals come up and have their couple of beers and their bit of food, and fantastic facility there. Didn't look to me like it was something that space age arena. It was just perfectly serviced, something that like every decent, reasonable size city in Ireland should have. But I say, I think your point with in terms of who soccer appeals at that level. I mean, it's great to have the chairman of Dalkey United here, because got to get those middle class.
Well, as when I was talking to the man I'm friendly with at the League of Ireland Club today, and he was talking then, or last week during the week, he was talking about the important community work they do and all this, which is true, and like a lot of League of Ireland clubs, they do a lot of that stuff. He said, I'm sure you're doing the same kind of community work at Dalkey. I said, yeah, we are, but we're trying to keep them out of the clutches of the corporate law firms.
Yeah. Until you see, Deloitte's having a business breakfast with Stephen Bradley and Joey O'Brien, soccer hasn't quite, rather than here's Bernard Jackman turning up at.
But the point about the
thing about stadiums is we are where we are with them, and that the GA dominated that. But there should be no new builds or rebuilds that doesn't have multi-purpose.
But also, how long, the cost, like compared to other places, the cost of getting it done, the speed of getting it done, the amount of objections if you're going to build a stadium, all these things that feed into much greater crises in Ireland than the football stadium crisis or the state of football in the country. Like they all will manifest themselves in this one too. And I think it is but that sense, it is important to kind of remember. Now, I would say about like the fracturing of the FAI post John Delaney, a lot of the reasons for Irish football's problems were also caused by
sorry, I wasn't trying to.
No, I know you weren't. I know, but I think it's important.
In
terms of
fair enough.
The money that got funneled into, that was taken to kind of to sustain the illusion about the FAI share of the Aviva and all that, and that has had a huge impact when you look at the way clubs had to, everyone had to buy tickets, all that sort of stuff, which had an impact.
It's post crash.
It's like we are dealing, and this is the thing. I think this is one of the things which is important is, when you look at these plans, you look at academies, you sometimes think facilities, I believe, solves an awful lot of these issues, and every. With a few exceptions, and sometimes you'll go to the clubs and you realise the exception is because they sold, very famous player went to an English club or whatever. With very few exceptions, like we were talking about this off, the thing you always hear when you're going around in grassroots football is you play somewhere, a great setup over there, and they've got the Astro and they've got everything, because so many of us are playing in substandard facilities, and that has an impact in terms of when the councils start calling off matches, when you go 6-8 weeks without matches, and then you're dependent on the energy levels or not of volunteers who are saying, oh, okay, well, I try and organise a friendly and book an Astro and all this kind of stuff. That is,
Or do I say, take the day off, kids?
Yeah, take the day off.
I'm going to watch Super Sunday.
Yeah, and it's great.
A colleague of ours used to say, 5 years ago, that one of the great failures in Irish sport is that we live in a predominantly wet and windy climate most of the year round, and it's certain where you're from it's wetter and windier again. The lack of indoor sports facilities that we have in this country still, now it's improved a lot, but the lack of indoor facilities to deal with, to acknowledge the climate that we live in is an extraordinary failure. And it comes back, you can't have an academy system unless you have facilities, unless you have coaches. We don't have enough coaches. We have to develop coaches.
That's one of the criteria for being a Category 1 academy in England, isn't it?
Full-time staff.
Full-size indoor.
At a time that the FAI says we need more full-time staff for the future of Irish football, it's letting staff go. We don't know, in what areas, but there's that kind of juxtaposition as well. There's just so many moving parts now that it just feels like it's it feels like there's no more pay. No, we've reached a point where it's time to start making decisions here.
I tell you who could solve this, Tommy.
I feel a segue coming out.
You know me too well. Jim Gavin. Jim Gavin.
Well, if nothing else,
it's a new Michael O'Leary. Put him in charge of that.
If nothing else, at least if Jim Gavin becomes president of Ireland, I think we all feel that the constitution is not what it was. There's not as much enjoyment in it anymore, and we'd like to see Jim get some constitutional enhancements going. That we
get the best amateur constitution in the world.
We get a few sandbox trials, and we really rev that constitution back up again,
The Minister for Further and Higher Education, James Lawless, said that he would make a fine Fianna Fáil presidential candidate. We had a show during the week and Conor McKeown said there's very few things you could have this sentence. Jim Gavin would be great at blank. Very few things you could put into that blank that he wouldn't be great at. Do you go along with that? I posed Meath manager, but Conor made the point. Be a great Meath manager.
He wouldn't be great on Love Island or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I think he's overqualified for the job. Sorry, Jim. Listen,
beneath you, yeah.
It's the highest honour of the state. Frankly, you're overqualified.
Yeah.
And he's just pulled off one of the biggest sort of transformations in terms of, we're talking about it.
Yeah.
We've basically spent the last hour beating our heads off the desk about the FAI and the whole idea of transformation and possibility of it. What Jim Gavin did with the game of Gaelic football, which was basically unwatchable 12 months ago. Only real diehards. Like, I was on holidays in Kerry the day of the All-Ireland Galway Armagh final. I dragged myself up for one of the few nice days off the beach to watch it. And, definitely questioned my life choices. To a point where a year later, everybody's going like, okay, I know some of the latter semi-finals, the final didn't live up, but as a championship as a whole was absolutely thrilling and captivating, and crowds were up and everything was it was just extraordinary. Like, and I know that's just sport, but the manner he went about it in terms of addressing the problem, gathering the people together. Assessing what the goals were, setting out the plan, etc. It's an extraordinary feat of getting something done.
Yeah.
And now he's being put forward for a job where you literally do nothing other than just be there and exist. Like, it's a total waste of his talents, and that's no disrespect. The office of president is I'm not. There's no slight on it, but it's entirely symbolic. Like, since Mary Robinson. Like, before Mary Robinson, we used to put, it was a sort of a
retirement home.
Yeah, jobs for the boys. You've been a good old skin. Sit up there and sign things and shake hands with visiting dignitaries, etc., etc. When Mary Robinson came in, Ireland decided that no, it's going to be this a representation of what we think we'd like to be. As a nation. So Mary Robinson, it was a bit progressiveness and respect for women. Mary McAleese, it was our friends in the North, Good Friday Agreement. That's hot right now. Let's get Mary in. And then Michael D, the crash had just happened. Bit left wing, bit of a poet, bit of a kickback against corporate Ireland that ruined us. So we'll bring him in. So it became this symbolic thing. Meanwhile, underneath the surface, we kept voting for the same centre-right lads like Albert and Bertie and Enda and Micheál and all these fellas who we kind of go, well, you know what? I like Michael D, but I wouldn't want him to actually do anything. So we just that's kind of what we are. We have this lofty thing, that's the presidency, but we don't want them to actually do anything. But we just have it there. Jim Gavin's a guy who does get him to fix something else. Yeah. Like, don't have him up there walking his dogs and planting trees and doing whatever. I don't know. Is that?
Yeah. Well,
I know you're in a promotion in the company because we need him doing stuff on the ground.
No, but I tell you what I think he could be, and I agree with what Tommy's saying in lots of ways, but actually I'll tell you what I think he could deliver, what he could say. And it's a lot of what we have talked about today and last week. A president, it might seem a bit too narrow to say he's going to be a president who would talk about how important sport is in the lives of Irish people. But it is hugely important. It's important, and we're not talking about sitting and watching sport, on a Saturday or Sunday, which we all do, and that's fine. But just that level of participation that people across the country have in sport, and what that feeds into, which I think he would talk about and be brilliant at, and I think is important because of the way Ireland is changing and the extreme resistance to some of that change, is to talk about community and to talk about the value of community and what it means to be part of the community, and how sport, and we all know this, how sport is essential in spreading out and spreading the message of community and saying to people, you belong in this community, you're welcome to this community. And I think, and it's not the way Jim Gavin gets things done in terms of the deeply methodical, well organised, and you talk to people who know him about how he would have approached the football review committee or whatever it was called, and just every eventuality and opposition or counterpoint would have been thought out and war gamed.
Because the once maligned football review committee, because that used to be, every time they proposed something over the years, shot down by everyone, not by Jim Gavin.
And that was because as well of his, and I people who know him have said this to me, like his absolute self-assurance and confidence, which is a great trait. That idea of hiring people who are smarter than you, or hiring people who are as high profile than you. So he populated the whole thing with people who had authority. It wasn't Jim Gavin and his flunkies. It was people, serious people. Everywhere you looked, there was somebody else saying something, and he wasn't. There's an ego there, but it was an ego that actually recognises that if these guys all get this done, people will be praising this. And I think there are certain elements of that if I know what you're saying, but I think there are so many things, because we've changed what we think the presidency should be, and because we've stretched it from it being that ceremonial role. Some people would argue that it's been stretched too far, but it has been stretched. I don't know. I don't see Jim Gavin stretching it in a way that people would object to, the way some people wrongly, in my view, objected to, like a lot of what Michael D said. But I think there is a huge opportunity there if he was to talk about those things, because those things are under attack. The idea of Ireland, as a welcoming place, and a place that actually embraces people, is under attack by a minority, but it's still having an impact. And some of the things you hear around the place, and stories you hear about, like racist abuse that people are being subjected to, is appalling. I mean, you hear things in the streets I lived in London for 20 years, and you hear things in the streets of Dublin that I'd never heard in London, and there's a value in some. I don't know. Look, is
that a bit of a reach that Jim Gavin, for all his abilities?
No. But I'm saying, if you talk about sport and you take, if you talk about sport and you talk about community and you talk about these things that matter to people, he could do that. He could do that in a way that very few people could. Now, he's a Fianna Fáil candidate, and that might. People will be saying, here's a Fianna Fáil candidate, but he can talk about certain things and the value and importance of them, whether he wants to or not. That's a different matter. But he can talk about them in a way that very few people can, and he can deliver it, and he can give people that message, and it's an important message. If that's one way, I think you could actually see him as bringing real value as a president.
I don't know if I've been thinking about it. I wasn't sure whether to take this seriously or not, but certainly going by the papers today, the Irish Independent reporting today that it's a 2-horse race in Fianna Fáil for the nomination. So I think the fact that Jim Gavin hasn't said anything means that this is something that's very much on the table. And I don't know if it's just a huge failure of imagination on my part. not alone can I just can't see it. We don't really know Jim Gavin. He's very guarded in all of his public sort of utterances. He's very guarded. So I'm struggling to see it, but I'm kind of with Tommy, and I hear what you're saying, Dion, but I find myself going, like, what would be the point? What would be the point of Jim Gavin being president of Ireland? When there are better things he could still be doing? Like what you're saying, he can do that without being president of Ireland, I think. But there's certainly more things he could probably do. He could definitely sort the FAI out.
But the one thing, the other advantage.
I just wonder why would he want to do this?
Well, the other advantage would be that it would. I think why would he want to? That's a different question. But I do think, the way sport is undervalued by certain people, and
it's always been undervalued
but this
by the
way,
state,
even to the extent that a very well-known political commentator this week, when Jim Gavin's candidacy was announced, happily told a reporter, "Oh, I never heard of Jim Gavin. I had to Google him."
I couldn't believe that.
I had to Google. How can you say? Do not say that. Imagine if you were sitting in an RT studio on a Sunday morning and they said that Ivana Bacik is the new leader of the Labour Party, and you said, "No, I've never heard of her. Yeah. Who is she? Let me Google her." No, I've nothing against Ivana Bacik, but she is, in the scheme of things, she's achieved far less. She's done great things, but in Irish public life, she's done a lot less than Jim Gavin. You would never be asked back. Yeah. You would never be asked back if you said that. But I've never heard of Jim Gavin. Let me check this guy out. Whoa, okay, he's done something.
It reveals a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah. We always said over the years, Dion, working in the sports department, that the smartest people in the room were working in the sports department.
We did say that, didn't we?
We would know who the Taoiseach of the country is, things like that. Whereas you go into other parts of the building and they would struggle to tell you who's the president of the GA. But in terms of the state, there's been a long history of the state ignoring sport, and other than start firing money at it as it does now. Properly understanding the role, when this state was formed, it was basically set up. Here's how it's going to run. Church is going to look after education. The GA is going to look after sport, and we'll try and do everything else. Which wasn't, health didn't go great. You know what I mean. So there's been this long history in this country, and this failure to recognise the importance. And when we say sport, we're talking about that concept of play, as opposed, of people being out and about, being active, doing things in their communities that are instruments of public good, basically. And there's been a long history in the state of a failure to fully understand and appreciate that. So, sorry, to go back to Jim Gavin, I just don't get why he would do it, why he would want to do it.
It's interesting because, as you say...
well, exactly, and I'm thinking,
silence is...
What you articulated, when you think, he's not doing this because he's bored or he wants a project. He's obviously has a motivation for doing it, and I would not be surprised if or when he comes to articulate it, that it might be something...
Our current president...
Similar to what you've just talked about. He clearly has something that he thinks, I feel this country needs to be tilted in a certain way, or needs a certain shading that maybe I can influence.
And the other thing is as well,
if that's around sport or just community.
Our current president could have articulated what you're saying. He's a
football man. Yeah, and he
well known.
Well, no, he is. He is a football man and a League of Ireland man.
Yeah.
And I think he probably has in his own way, but he's articulated other things as well, which probably have got more attention. But the other thing is with Jim Gavin is, he'll win it if he goes for it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I think even, in my saying to my podcast partner, who once was put forward as a presidential candidate himself, but seems to have fallen by the wayside, and he was saying,
be a bolter.
Are we ruling him out?
Well, he's saying he doesn't know if he can the drop in lifestyle standards. If you
Joe Brawley, for the sake of people who aren't up to date with your podcast.
Unbelievable.
Who's Jim Gavin? Who's Joe Brawley?
But Joe said on our podcast this week, he said, Jim would win it, would sweep up if he goes for it. Like, he would. Yeah. And I think that is the thing. If he goes for it, like, you look at all the candidates, and I find a lot of the presidential debate stuff so boring.
Joe also said Donegal couldn't be stopped.
Well, yeah, actually, hold on a second. Actually, I just realised something.
Well, we don't know what sort of. We don't know what sort of campaigner he'd be. Because there is literally no issues to discuss in the presidential election campaign. The debates are all about
they're dirty,
all personal. It's all what you did, what you haven't. Now, I'm sure Jim doesn't have skeletons in the closet, but I mean, it's. I mean, I don't know how
I just why would you?
Yeah.
If you're Jim Gavin, why would you?
One person asking them that same question, John, asking why would I bother with this, is Ruben Amorim. We're going to end on this. We're not going to get to this media chat.
Do you know Shelburne showed them a try? Did I say that to you earlier? Shelburne showed them one possible path forward for Man United. They didn't concede a corner last night in Belfast. Right. I think I could see Man United getting 12 extra points a season if they didn't concede any corners.
Well, they might need a new manager to do that, because Ruben Amorim has just come out and said, sometimes I want to quit.
Oh, God.
I mean, if the sight of him in the Grimsby dugout was one thing, saying this is just as plain as it gets.
Well, it's kind of sad to see a kind of...
But it's not, well, like...
As is. It's on a human level, just it's this... person kind of shrinking before our eyes.
Well, shrinking from what? Like, we didn't, like, this is, like, I get your point, but I do find at this stage there's something slightly just wearing about his kind of, oh God, listen, look, I'm telling you, lads, it's just agonising, this stuff. And
he's constantly saying, I can't do this.
Well, he basically issued a come and sack me plea.
But he did say it last season, and like, he has been, and there is a value in his sort of, he has been like the breakout star of punditry over the last year. You know what I mean? Like people think Roy Keane is damning when he comes out about Manchester United, but nobody is as damning as the Manchester United manager. With that one kind of failing where you're looking at, you actually can do something about this. You're coming out saying, these guys, Jesus, and what do you expect? And I think It was really so interesting what happened on against Grimsby on Wednesday night, because of the power of optics for a manager. Like, the word optics is a bit cliche, but that sense, like, you wanted, it's like the I was at Spurs, or I was at the Emirates today. Harry Redknapp was Spurs manager, and got out from, I started shouting at Pavlyuchenko, "Fucking run about! Run about!"
That was excellent.
And that's what you wanted. You just want, run about! You wanted him on the sideline doing that. And like, everyone's like, yeah, Harry, tell him to run about.
Yeah. I think Miguel Delaney described it as his Wally with the brolly moment, and that it just feels like, very hard to come back to. But I go back to my point about just Old Trafford being absolute abattoir of ambitions, and he's like the brave young soldier heading off to war, coming back, post-traumatic stress, hands shaking, quivering wreck within less than 12 months.
I actually couldn't understand when there was talk pre-season that Amorim was going to be under pressure this season. I actually didn't think he was under any pressure at all coming into the season. I thought he pretty much was going to get a free pass this season, get them up the table a bit. Not a free pass, but I didn't think he would. I did not think that Man United would get to next summer with him not as manager. And now it nearly feels like, are they going to get through the international break with him as manager? In 3 games, it has absolutely
I don't know. But I thought, the minute I saw the fixtures come out, I was like, if he gets to the end of September, he'll have done well. Because their season last year, we did actually talk about this last week in terms of United, in how summer has this amazing power regeneration, and everyone forgets.
Yeah.
But there's part of you that still remembers it, and it's happened very quickly. To
And some of the
season last year was so bad.
Yeah.
And like Tommy's right, like this, what Manchester United does and the way they went about bringing him in was a great example of it. Now, he hasn't shown anything in terms of like the fact that he's still here and sacrificing players. Like they've backed him to like a ridiculous degree. Yeah. In terms of letting players go, in terms of doing things that actually another manager might come in and say, hold on a second, we need to get Marcus Rashford back. We need to, these players still have something to offer.
And against their stated, direction that they were supposedly going to go under Ratcliffe and co, which is that, no, we won't be beholden to the whims of one manager.
Yeah.
We will have the sophisticated football structure, that'll we'll recruit players for our team, managers will come in, but they won't shape to literally do the 180-degree turn with that and bring a guy who has one system and none of the players that he has.
But that's because ultimately they're working for a Sun King, which is Jim Ratcliffe. And like Jim Ratcliffe got bored with the idea, Dan Ashworth came along and said, we've got this superstructure, we're all working here and we've got everybody working. Here's our candidates for the manager to fit in, the sort of bureau chief over here to fit in and be in charge of team selection and various things like that. And Jim Ratcliffe was like, who are these losers? Get me a handsome Mediterranean type.
Trousered.
Tommy Martin wasn't available and he came back with Ruben Amorim. And even that sense of Amorim saying, actually, I'd rather cake it in the summer. But, and like anyone who has worked for a capricious, dictator would know that this is like these whims are the things that actually govern and make people respond to. So it was like, we've got to come back with this manager. So they said, no, your offer is now or never. Yeah. Come back now or you won't get the job. And last year has been hugely damaging for now. Manchester United if Manchester United in the summer had said, well, actually, we've got to work on the basis of there is a collective here, but they've signed players for him. This midfield idea is so crazy that he still has done nothing to rectify the midfield. But everyone is perishing in this system he has, which doesn't work, which just is a failure. And that they have created this monster. And now, I have some sympathy for him in that sense but it is also kind of narcissistic at this point for him to be constantly talking about how terrible he feels about everything. Like his job, if you're either a Manchester United manager or you're not, and if you're a Manchester United manager, there are certain times when you've just got to stand on the sideline and tell them to fucking run about.
Yeah, and they didn't lose at Grimsby because they played 3-4-3.
He didn't get the magnets right.
But the idea, we're all involved in coaching teams at different levels. It doesn't matter what age group they are. You have your players, and you go out, and the first thing you do, I'm sure, is you shore up the back. You get somebody, press gang somebody into going in goal who you think mightn't let in too many.
That's what he's trying to do at the minute.
You shore up the back, and then you work your way forward, and you build your team from there. And it's been patently obvious to everybody that's watching football that Manchester United don't have a goalkeeper. Defence, and midfield is non-existent. They went out and they spent 200 million on 3 forwards.
But they're still not scoring goals.
Well, as somebody depressingly said upstairs who said that they signed the third best forward in Leipzig last season.
Yeah.
And a £74 million striker who takes the 10th penalty in a penalty shootout.
But again, that's on the the idea of penalty shootouts or penalty kickers being decided by the penalty takers is gone 30 years ago. I always remember
it's like hands up, who fancies it? Yeah.
I always remember Brian Kerr years and years ago just saying that, and it was the first time I'd heard somebody saying something to him like, would you just go on who fancies it? And Brian, in that scathing way, like, will we fuck? Like, you know what I mean? We'll be going out and we'll be recognising who we think is the best place to take the penalties. And now I actually don't know if it's said what happened there, but the idea that he didn't intervene and say, you're not like, you're not going, okay, it's between me and Onana. Okay, here I am.
Yeah. Stand back, Andre. I'll take this.
I got this.
I wouldn't do that to you.
Yeah, if it comes around again, I'll be ready to take the
at least Amorim can be consoled that Manchester United is not necessarily terminal for your career. There is life after it, as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Jose Mourinho.
Yeah, we've two other managers sacked this week already.
It's gotten that desperate that I'm seeing Sean Dyche clips from the overlap circulating. United fans are sharing it, saying Dyche called it, Dyche had a point, and it was just him saying, I would do better with that team, because he's looking at the team thinking it's not that bad.
Well, it can't be. I think each time Manchester United lose a manager, the idea that get Roy Keane in till the end of the season becomes.
You sack him, you don't sack him now. I mean, I don't know.
I think he'll probably quit. He does sound like he's.
He's got.
Yes,
and I think they're saying the Athletic, sources that know him said this is he's just not like him. We just don't recognise this guy. It's what that obviously that club does to manage. They all end up. It's Mick McCarthy. I remember saying, when you become the butt of the joke, it's all over.
Yeah. John, we're just missing an impression from you now, and we're good to go. That's it, lads. That's been loads. The beep on Tommy's watch tells us that we've gone another hour around the clock.
The sun has gone around the moon.
Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us again. It was absolutely brilliant. Tommy, Martin, John Greene and Dion Fanning.
Thanks, Conan.
Thanks, Conan.